Welcome to Sufi Voices. I'm Wafa, and as Rumi says, out beyond all notions of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field and I'll meet you there. I look forward to connecting with you every week to expand our hearts and learn about the universal language of love. Welcome to another edition of Sufi Voices. I'm delighted to be with you today because I missed you very much and I am sorry for the long silence. These have been very difficult weeks for me as a Lebanese born in Beirut. I was suffering with the people of Beirut and I was praying and I was trying to do my best to alleviate some of the hurt and suffering. I spent a lot of time phoning my friends, making sure they were fine and trying to set up healing for them and also help certain charities. So forgive me if we haven't had Sufi Voices, but these few weeks have made me think very carefully about today's subject, which is about resilience. And funnily enough, there isn't so much about resilience except for lovely, lovely stories. So today's program will be full of lovely, lovely Sufi stories. We start, of course, our program with Rumi, who says, where there is ruin, there is hope for a treasure. So I do hope that from the ruins of Beirut, Beirut will rise again and find its many, many treasures. And believe me, having lived there the first 19 years of my life, this is a magical city, a city by the sea, a city not far from the mountain, a city with such beautiful houses and lovely people and the best food on the planet. So I do hope we find these treasures again amongst the rubble. And also for all the people who have been volunteering, I send my blessings and I send my absolute admiration. All these young people volunteering, whether in soup kitchens, whether in trying to pick all the rubble without industrial masks or brooms, in their bare hands practically. I bow to you. I bow to you, young people, because wherever you stand, you are the soul of that place. You are the soul of Beirut, and I bow to you, my wonderful, wonderful friends. What I have learned from this unbelievable disaster that any human mind could not conceive it would happen, the third biggest explosion probably after Hiroshima in the history of mankind in such a tiny city, is that at the end it is our humanity which is going to come out triumphant. And humanity did come out triumphant because everybody helped. Everybody. It did not matter whether you were rich or poor or inside or outside the country. Help was pouring in and help was being made available to all sorts of people. For instance, my favorite restaurant in Beirut called Meirig, which is a delicious Armenian restaurant, and I had been there last November, decided after it was completely collapsed to become a soup kitchen. So every day it produces 1,000 food parcels to distribute to the people of Beirut who have lost their homes, who have lost their livelihoods, and who have lost probably very beloved people in their family, such as the firefighters who were sent at the beginning, some young people who had no idea that it was more of a nuclear disaster than a normal fire. So I bow to these amazing, courageous people, and I would like to offer them this beautiful poem by Hafiz, which says, I have learned so much. I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has shared so much of itself with me that I can no longer call myself a man, a woman, an angel, or even a pure soul. Love has befriended Hafiz so completely, and it has befriended me, my friends. It has turned to ash and freed me of every concept and image my mind has ever known. This poem was translated by Daniel Ladinsky in his book, The Gift. Thank you, Hafiz, for absolutely expressing what I feel in this horrible, horrible, difficult time of my city of birth. Want to know why are there so many stories in Sufi voices? Well, I believe, like Idris Shah, this great Sufi historian, writer who has passed away but has written a number of books on Sufis and Sufi story, he used to say that the great collections of stories from the East were like encyclopedias. They are storehouses of wisdom and knowledge, ready to be studied, to be appreciated and cherished. To Idris Shah, story represented much more than mere entertainment. He saw them as complex psychological documents, forming a body of knowledge that had been collected and refined since the dawn of humanity, and more often than not, passed down by word of mouth. So we will be reading a story that Idris Shah wrote for children, but has a lovely, lovely lesson about resilience. But he also, Idris says, before we read the story, that these stories are technical documents. They are like maps or kind of blueprints. And in them, he shows people how to use the maps because they have forgotten. You might think it's a strange way to teach with stories, asks Idris Shah. But long ago, this was the way people passed on wisdom. Everyone knew how to take the wisdom from the story. They could see through the layers in the same way you see a fish frozen in a block of ice. But the world where we are living has lost this skill, a skill they certainly once had. They hear the stories and they like them because the stories amuse them, make them feel warm. But they can't see past the first layer into the ice. The stories also are like a lovely chessboard. We all know how to play chess, and we can be drawn into a game so complicated that our faculties are drained. But Imagine if the game was lost from a society for centuries and then the fine chessboard and its pieces were found. Everyone would cluster around to see and praise the chessboard. They might never imagine that such a fine object ever had a purpose other than to entertain the eyes. The story's inner value has been lost in the same way. At one time, everyone knew how to play with them, how to decipher them, but now the rules have been forgotten. It is for us to show people again how the game is played. Thank you, Idris Shah, for your wonderful wisdom stories. Talking about resilience, right in the middle of recording this show, my internet stopped working. There's a huge storm here in Poland, and all the preparations I had made for this show are on my iPad, which I can't reach at the moment. So we are going to have to be way more resourceful. And I also remembered that in Beirut, the electricity for the past 30 years has been diminishing. First, it was 3 hours cut every day, and then more and more and more. And now they probably don't have electricity after this explosion. So my little mishaps with the internet in Poland do not compare with the trouble the people of Beirut have at the moment with connecting to the internet, with electricity, with living in houses without windows, with having to look for friends who are missing, for being injured. So thank goodness that I have a lot of books that I can rely on for this show, and I found this lovely, lovely book by Saadi, who is one of the most famous poets of Iran, and he was, of course, a Sufi, a 13th century Sufi. The book is called The Discontented Dervishes and Other Persian Tales. It's retold by Arthur Shawley. And I found in it a very fun story about the miracle of an opened door. The poor dervish sat down in the dust and wept. A blind man heard the cries and groped towards him. "What's the matter?" he asked. "I had hoped for help from the proud rich man who lives here," replied the dervish in angry despair. "But he has just shut the door in my face." "Don't cry a moment longer," said the blind man. He reached out and touched the dervish and tugged at the collar of his robe. "Come to my place," he said, pulling the dervish to his feet. "Come and eat with me. Stay the night." When they arrived at the blind man's lodging, he prepared a meal and laid it before the dervish. When they had eaten, the grateful dervish prayed. "May God grant you your sight," he said. In the night, the blind man felt tears trickle down his cheek. In the morning, he opened his eyes. And what happened? He saw the world. He saw the colors. He saw the face of the dervish. News of the miracle spread all over the city. Even the proud man was interested, and the rich man was interested, and sought the former blind man out. "Tell me, how did it happen?" he begged. "Who was it who brought light into your dark world?" "O foolish tyrant and blind of heart," replied the man, "do you recall the dervish who cried at your house, wanting you to let him in? If you would have light in your dark heart, kiss the dust at the feet of such men. Last night you shut your door in the face of the dervish. It was that same dervish who opened the door in mine and in my eyes." Saadi, whose story you've just heard, was born in 1213 in Shiraz in Iran. He became the royal poet to King Saad Atabak, but he started out his life as a poor orphan, and because of Mongol invasions, traveled for 30 of his 80 years, journeying through Europe, Ethiopia, Egypt, Syria, Pakistan, Armenia, Turkey, Arabia, Persia, Afghanistan, India, and Italy. And he famously said, "Only once did I grumble at how fortune had treated me. I was so poor that I could not even afford shoes. I went into a mosque at Kiyah with a sore and complaining heart, and there I saw a man with no feet." So talking about complaining, there's another wonderful story he writes in this book called The Old Woman's Cat. "Oh, I've had enough of this," says the old woman's cat. "This hovel is falling to bits. It's drafty and uncomfortable. The food is almost non-existent. And even then, I have to catch it for myself. No, no, no. This won't do for me." So off he decided to leave the woman and go on his travel, looking everywhere for a suitable place to live. There seemed to be no house up to his standards. Then he came to the palace of the Sultan, crept through the gates. "Ah, yes," said the cat to itself, peeping through the doorway. "That's the kind of house I like. Nice silk cushions, warm rugs, lots of creamy milk, and freshly cooked meat. Yes, of course, a palace is the only fit residence for a cat of my quality." Just then, twang! An arrow quivered in the doorpost before the cat. Twang! Another flicked on its tail. Twang, twang, twang! Arrows from the Sultan's guards fell round the cat in heavy shower. "Yow! Meow!" screamed the cat, howling and bleeding. It fled across the palace yard, but the arrows followed. Soon the cat was in a sorry state. "Mercy!" it sobbed, "mercy!" dodging through the gates. "If only I got out of this palace alive, that old woman's shack and just an occasional small mouse are all I shall ever desire." Thank you, Saadi, for your words of wisdom in this program on resilience. But I want to tell you about Saadi a little bit more, is that Saadi actually, when he retired, and although he received royal patronage and wrote 23 books, the most famous of them being the Gulistan, the Rose Garden, and the Bustan, the Orchard, he put these stories he had collected and made up and fragments of his own experience. It was the wisdom of a lifetime that he put in his books, woven into his poetry. And while his poetry is difficult to translate, and according to people, each word of Saadi has 22 meanings, the stories are part of the poetic structure of the books, and they are a lot of fun because they have lots of character, like the old woman's cat, like the blind man and the dervish, like the youth who smiles at death and another who escapes it through a clever old man's trick, a fox, a pupil who learns every lesson but one. It's all about birds, beasts, and insects sharing their stories with slaves, beggars, kings, servants, teachers. So after this break, we might find still another story by Saadi to share. Part of resilience is trusting in God or the universe that they will have our back, that at the end, although bad things happen to us, and they do, this is life, things will right themselves. I mean, in Lebanon, there have been amazing miracle stories. One of them was a little miracle story, which I will definitely write about one day. And it was about my friend Najwa, who had a house in Beirut next to the electricity building and thus near the port. And it was after the explosion, everything fell. All her kitchen was destroyed, her bedroom was destroyed, her cupboards were on the ground, of course, no glass. But then she told me 25 young people went up to her house and cleared all the rubble. And the door she had installed, which was $1,500 just last summer, was completely broken. They boarded the house after they cleaned it with wood. But then she said to me, "Do you know, Wafa, I have a story to tell you. You remember when you came to visit me after I had done up the house, you brought me a little icon of the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna is the Madonna of Poland. She is considered like the Queen of Poland. And I love this Black Madonna. I have a beautiful story about her as well. Anyway, I like to give this icon to the friends I love. So I had brought the icon to Beirut to my friend Najwa, and she hung it on the wall. And believe it or not, where the Black Madonna hung, the wall did not crumble. Amidst the rubble, that icon still stood on the wall, safe and sound. Talking about reliance on the divine, Saadi has a beautiful story about this called The Saint and the Ferry Boat. He says, "Waiting with me on the river bank was an old dervish. When the boat arrived, the ferryman called out, 'The fare is 1 dirham, the fare is 1 dirham.' I had just this amount, so I got in. "What about you, old man?" the boatman called. "Alas," said the dervish, "I have no money." "Then you stay where you are," laughed the boatman, pushing him off. I cried out in distress at the way this godless man treated the dervish, but the saintly old man called out to me, "Don't distress yourself for one moment, my friend. The one who carries the boat will surely carry me." The old man, the dervish, unrolled his prayer mat and spread it on the surface of the water. Yes, the water. I thought I must be dreaming. The dervish got onto the mat and sailed across the river quite safely. I was so amazed I could not sleep all night. In the morning, the old man laughed at me. "Still astonished?" he chuckled. "It couldn't be simpler. The boat brought you, and God brought me." And lo and behold, my internet has come back and I have found the story by Idris Shah, which I absolutely love. It's called The Boy Without the Name. He says, once upon a time, long, long, long ago, in a country far from here, there lived a boy who had no name. It is very strange to have no name. And you might ask, why didn't he have a name? Well, it was like this. On the day he was born, his parents were just about to choose a name for him when a very wise man came to the house. "This is a very, very important boy," he told them, "and I'm going to give him something marvelous one day. But I will have to give him his name first. So, please, don't give him a name yet." "All right," said his parents, "but when will he get a name?" "I cannot say now," replied the wise man. "But remember, he is a very, very important boy, and you must be careful not to give him a name." So the parents called him Bin'am, which means nameless in the language of that country, for he was a boy without a name. One day, Nameless went to see his friend who lived in the next house. "Everybody has a name, and I would like to have one too. Do you have a name you can give me?" he asked. The other boy said, "I only have one name. It is Anwar. That's my name, and I need it. If I gave it to you, what would I do for a name? Besides, what would you give me if I did give you my name? You haven't got anything." "I've got a dream I don't want. I could give you that," said Nameless. "But how can we find out how to get a name and how to pass on a dream from one person to another?" asked Anwar. "I know," replied Nameless. "Let's go and ask the wise man." Now, the wise man knew everything, and fortunately he didn't live very, very far away. So Nameless and Anwar went to his house and they knocked on the door. As soon as he saw them, the wise man said, come in, Nameless and Anwar," even though he had never seen them before. "How did you know who we were?" they asked. "I know many things, and besides, I was expecting you," said the wise man.
"Sit down here, and I'll see what I have in my magic boxes," he continued. So the boys sat down on cushions beside the wise man, and he took up a small box, saying, "This is a magic box, and it is absolutely full of all kinds of names. You just see." And when he opened the lid of the box, the boys could hear all the names in it. They were all kinds of names. Names saying themselves, names saying other names, names saying names from all the countries of the world. And the wise man picked a name out of the box and handed it to Nameless. And the name jumped onto his hand, ran up his arm and sprang onto his shoulder, and then it went into his ear and right into his head. And suddenly the boy knew that he had a name. "Hooray, hooray," he said. I've got a name. My name is Husni." And so indeed Husni was. Then Anwar cried out, "But I want the dream that Husni promised me."
"Patience, my boy," said the wise man.
And he picked up another box and opened its lid.
"This is a box of dreams that people don't want," he said. "You just stroke your head to take the dream out of it, Husni, and then put the dream into this box."
And Husni did so. And sure enough, when he stroked his head, he found that the dream came into his hand. And when he put his hand down near the box, the dream popped into the box. Then the wise man took up another box, and he opened the lid and said,
"This box is full of wonderful dreams."
And the two boys could see all sorts of marvelous dreams inside. Wonderful dreams. Butterflies, phoenixes, mosques, palaces, boats, magic carpets, seas, flowers. Amazing dreams.
"I'm going to give you one dream each," said the wise man, and then he asked them each to pick a dream.
And they did. And the dreams, as soon as they caught hold of them, ran up their arms, onto their shoulders, into their ears, and right into their heads, just as Husni's name had done. And after that, forever and ever, Husni had a name. And the two boys, Husni and Anwar, always had wonderful dreams. So this is a story about resilience and patience, that with patience and a bit of luck we could turn our fortunes around. And thank you, Idris Shah, for your amazing stories. He has dozens and dozens of them if you're interested, and he's an amazing Sufi storyteller. He has stories for young readers, he has stories for adults, The 100 Tales of Wisdom, A Perfumed Scorpion, Caravan of Dreams, Wisdom of the Idiots, The Magic Monasteries. He has a novel. He has lots of very, very fun stories about the exploits of Mullah Nasruddin, the pleasantries of Mullah Nasruddin, and the subtleties of Mullah Nasruddin. And of course, he has a travel book, Destination Mecca, and he has a lot of philosophy book and Sufi study books. The Sufis, The Way of the Sufis, The Tales of the Dervishes, The Book of the Book, Neglected Aspects of Sufi Study, The Commanding Self, and Knowing How to Know.
أنا الفقير إليك يا رب أنت عني عني غني الضعف فيها أصيل وأنت رب قوي الكل يفنى ويبلى وأنت وحدك حي أحيا بي روحي طموحي ملأ رجاء وخوفا مولانا يا مولانا مولانا يا مولانا يا مولانا أنا الفقير إليك يا رب أنت عني غني الضعف في أصيل وأنت رب قوي الكل يفنى ويبلى أنت وحدك حي أحيا بي روحي طموحي ملأ رجاء وخوفا فأنت مولانا يا مولانا أنت مولانا يا مولانا يا مولانا مولانا يا مولانا أنت مولانا يا مولانا يا مولانا
This was Sami Yusuf singing in Arabic Al-Faqir, which means the poor person. The song ends with Allah, 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 Hay. God is alive, God is alive. But it starts with God, I'm a poor person, I need you. But you don't really have need of me. I am weak, but you are abundant in strength. All things vanish and disintegrate, but you alone are the living. Hay, living in Arabic. You gave me life and an aspiring spirit full of hope, for you are my protector. You are my protector, and you are alive. You are alive. It is time now for our 7 wise princesses. And what will happen to Shah Bahram after he had visited the 7 princesses, each of a different pavilion of a different color, which represent the rainbow? And then what will happen to his mind and heart. So this is the final chapter in my book, The 7 Wise Princesses, which I wrote a few years ago, published by Barefoot Books, and it was based on a poem by Nizami, who is another Sufi poet who lived in Azerbaijan. And Nizami wrote again in the 13th century, and he was a wonderful, wonderful poet. And the name of that poem on which the story is based is called, in Persian, Haft Paykar, the 7 Beauties. Our chapter is entitled The Shah and the Shepherd. Shah Bahram had spent several months visiting the 7 pavilions, and he emerged a wiser and happier man. It was now springtime, and the earth smelled of musk. Green shoots poked their heads above the ground, and the sun shone like a copper plate. Violets wore dresses of deep purple, and lines of lotus flowers decorated the ponds like living necklaces. Lilies opened their hearts to the sun, showing their golden centers. Wild mint grew along the walls, and the tamarisk trees gave off their odor of camphor. The willow trees displayed their buds for the nightingales to hop and strut among the Persian New Year had arrived. To celebrate this important date, Shah Bahram held a magnificent feast outside the palace gates. The royal fanfare sounded, and sweetmeats were given to the crowds thronging outside the palace. Delighted to see the Shah back again, people sang and danced and picnicked among the flowers. When dusk came, fireworks went up, lighting the sky with purple, gold, and silver dust. "What a lovely day!" exclaimed everyone as they happily wended their day home. But the end of the day was not happy for the Shah. He had barely put his feet up when a messenger entered the throne room in a hurry. "Your Majesty," he cried, "Your Majesty, the father of the Chinese princess Yagmanaz has attacked our borders with his troops. The people living there are frightened and ask you to come to their aid."
"Call the Grand Vizier," Shah Bahram ordered.
The Grand Vizier, the highest of the ministers, or like a prime minister, was a man called Rastraushan. He was sly and greedy. He had gradually emptied the treasury during the Shah's visits to the 7 pavilions and had hidden all the money away. He was a cruel and evil man too. Whoever tried to tell the Shah what was happening was either killed or imprisoned before they could warn him. So the people kept silent out of sheer terror. They went about their business on tiptoe in case Rastraushan noticed them and took their money, their houses, or even their lives. He was a nasty, nasty piece of work.
"Your Majesty called?" asked the Grand Vizier in his oily voice.
"Yes, we need to send troops to the border. The Chinese are attacking."
"But we don't have enough money in the treasury, Your Majesty, and the troops will not move without pay."
"Strange," exclaimed Shah Bahram.
"The treasury was full of gold before I visited the 7 pavilions and left it in your care. You know, sire, things are not what they used to be. Everything costs a great deal of money these days," lied Rastraushan, "like the feast you have just held."
"Very well," said Bahram, dismissing him. "We will discuss it in the morning." The Shah could not sleep a wink. He tossed and turned and did sums in his head over and over again. He could not believe his money could have disappeared so fast. "There is something not quite right here," he concluded. "I must find out what it is."
So, at the first rays of light, the Shah mounted his favorite horse and went riding in the desert. The early sunlight painted wonderful patterns on the sand. The air was crisp and the palm trees heavy with dates. Riding was excellent for thinking, Shah Bahram believed. So, whenever he had a problem, he tried to solve it on horseback. He rode for a while, churning the problem over in his head until he noticed black smoke rising like a coil into the blue sky. He spurred his horse towards it. Getting closer, he saw a tent, some sheep grazing, and an old man watching over the sheep. Beside the tent was a tree, and hanging upside down from one of the branches was a dog tied with a rope by its paws.
"That's strange," thought the Shah. "Why would anyone do this to an animal?" "Hello, old man," he called. "What have you done to this poor dog of yours?" "Only what he deserves," the shepherd replied, rising to his feet and greeting the Shah.
"What has he done to deserve such punishment?" Shah Bahram persisted.
"Please sit down, sire, and share my meal with me. I will tell you a story that will curdle your blood."
So Shah Bahram sat by the fire, sharing the shepherd's modest meal and listening intently to the shepherd's story.
"So long ago," said the shepherd, "I was a wealthy man with many sheep and a rich table and bed. This dog that you can see up there was my flock's guardian, my trusted friend and my companion. For many years he guarded my flock with tooth and claw from thieves and wolves. Whenever I needed to go to town, I knew my flock was safe with him in charge. And when my business kept me away overnight, he brought my sheep safely back home. For many years, it was a perfect friendship based on care and trust and hardship shared. One day, I decided to count the flock. To my surprise, I found there were 7 sheep missing. Gone! I thought I had made a mistake, so I let the matter go. The following week, I counted my flock again. Again, 7 were missing. I told no one about it, but resolved to stay awake at night to catch the thief. But I must have dozed off for a short while on each occasion, for I could never catch anyone. Week by week, my flock became smaller, and day by day I became poorer. From owner of the flock, I became its shepherd. Despite all this, I still trusted my dog. One day, I was dozing beside a stream, having a wonderful dream of riches and a life of ease, when a wolf, howling like a dog, awoke me. I opened one eye, but did not move, keeping my head bowed over my staff and pretending to snooze. I saw a wolf bitch
approach from afar and call my dog. He ran to her like a long-lost friend, wagging his tail, happy to see her. They tumbled on the ground together, licking each other's ears. Tired of playing, my dog lay down and slept while she pretended to lie down too. When she was sure the coast was clear, she went to the nearest sheep, carried it off by the neck, and swiftly killed and ate it in 4 great gulps. My dog never heard a sound and never made a move. In fury, I took a rope, bound him by his paws, and tied him upside down to this tree. He had betrayed my trust and deserved to be punished. What would you have done in my place? Shah Bahram had no words to say. He just nodded, thanked the shepherd for his hospitality, stood up and went straight back to his palace with a face full of menace.
"This shepherd has taught me a true lesson of leadership," Shah Bahram muttered to himself. "I am like a shepherd and my subjects like my flock, while my Grand Vizier, whom I trusted completely, had acted like a bad dog. He has frittered my money away somehow and made my people poor and weak. He deserves to be punished immediately." Back at the palace, Shah Bahram called his guards and ordered them to throw the Grand Vizier into prison. "If the people see him put away," he reasoned, "they will find the courage to tell me what he did to them when my back was turned." When the people heard that the Grand Vizier was in prison, they went in their dozens to meet their Shah. They told him how Rastraushan had ordered innocent people to be killed and imprisoned so that his evil ways would not be discovered. They told him how he had taken their houses, gardens, money, jewels, and servants, how he had lied, cheated, and above all, conspired with the enemy, leaving the kingdom's borders weak and badly guarded. The audience lasted until late at night. Shah Bahram retired to bed, but could not close his eyes from the shame and pain of it all. He blamed himself for being blind and weak and for trusting such a wicked man. Just as the sun was kissing the palm trees good morning, Shah Bahram ordered the Grand Vizier to be hanged like a thief and a cheat. He called the people to come and witness what happens to those who commit treachery. Then he invited the old shepherd to the palace, thanked him for his valuable lesson and guardianship, and gave him a new flock and a new dog. From this time on, Shah Bahram reigned with even greater attention to justice and fairness. He made sure his treasury was once again filled with gold and sent his soldiers back to the border to defend it with renewed vigor. Hearing that Bahram was fully in charge once again, the Chinese ruler changed his mind about attacking the frontier and ordered his troops to turn back. After all, his daughter Yagmanas would have been sad to know that her father was planning to attack what was now her home. Shah Bahram did not rest there. He ordered the 7 pavilions to be turned into fire temples, for he believed that fire was like the light of heaven and had to be kept burning day and night to ensure all was right with the world. With a heavy heart, remembering the many happy days they had spent together, he sent the lovely princesses away, giving them rich presents of jewelry and clothing. He asked 7 priests to take their place and keep the fires in the pavilions ablaze. Each priest was known as Atravan, which in Persian means belonging to fire. He himself turned to worship God, forgetting himself
and turning his mind to greater things. One day he took his crown from his head and placing it on the empty throne, set out with his courtiers to hunt. Leaving them to chase after the deer, he hunted the wild donkeys. After a while, he spotted a beautiful beast and spurred his horse towards it. It ran into a cave, pursued by the Shah and his page. The page, afraid of what might be within, stopped at the entrance, while Shah Bahram entered fearlessly. For a whole hour, the page waited for his master, but when there was still no sign of him, he sounded the alarm so loudly that it must have reached heaven. The Shah's courtiers came and searched every blade of grass. They turned over every stone and looked into every hole. Still, there was no sign of Bahram. With tears in their eyes, they went back to the palace and told everyone what had happened. The whole kingdom mourned and wept for the loss of the great Shah, who had ruled wisely and well. For 40 days and 40 nights, the city was draped with black cloth as a sign of mourning. All the citizens were filled with sadness and pity for themselves and for their children, for they knew that not many Shah would be remembered as Shah Bahram would for many centuries to come. And with this, my dear friends, we come to the end of my book, The 7 Wise Princesses, and the end of our program. I hope you enjoyed this show on resilience. I hope you have enjoyed the stories about resilience. And as Nelson Mandela once said, and I think he was a Sufi in his own way, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fear. And also, as Rumi said, there is a community of the spirit. Join it. Fuel the delight of walking in the noisy street and being the noise. For in the middle of despair, community is a source of support, stability, and wisdom. And here is to you, the Beirut community, so resilient, so courageous. Bless you, bless you, bless you. With these words, I bid you Ma'as salami, Namaste.